I like that. You can have a floating Pelham Forum, okay? Like there's a floating crap game in the music, dice and golf.
I don't remember that bit.
Yeah. Yeah, they had to keep moving the location of the crap game because the police were always after them. Yeah, I did that revision. Oh yeah, the bit I, just presenting, writing about the truth line, which, I've done a great deal, but with a slightly different setting, trying to work on the introduction to what I hope will be the textbook. And I so I was saying, we only, each of us, we only have a tiny part of the truth, blah, blah. And I said, I believe it is a happening that is a fact that the world would be a better place if religions cooperated rather than fought. And I feel that's a strong statement. And yet there is a part of religion, part of the power of religion, that, I have the one God, I have the only God. And I'm not religious. I'm agnostic. I guess in a way, I probably don't believe in God. In that, if someone said, "Do you believe in God?" I'd probably have to say, "Well, probably, perhaps not." And I made that statement. If religions could cooperate rather than fought. And this is where I think the Strata material is excitingly comprehensive. Because it can look at that, it can look at, okay, the only God is Jesus, and if you don't believe in Jesus, you're not going to make it, and in this formally in Strata, that would, I can't call that opinionation. I've been reading extensively at the moment because there's some very good stuff coming out, both as novels and as history. How did the slaves make it? I mean, how did they make it? How did they turn out people like the end of like Stacey Abrams or Martin Luther King or Mahalia Jackson? Or, how did that occur? Because for generations and generations, they had no hope. And yet they did. And this, I guess this, as I mentioned here at other times, there's material coming out now from universities and novelists and journalists and politicians as well, that is looking at all the starkness of it. Okay. And I have trouble making the next statement I'm going to make. And I'm sorry I don't have a name. That's not fair. But the young sort of woman journalist who put together something called the 1619 Project. Because 1619 was when the first slaves arrived in America. That's what the 1619 project is. And she set that up. And the New York Times got a Pulitzer Prize for it and took a whole lot of criticism. But then went on to write an article that's in the Atlantic magazine that is saying, because she's quite light, you know, she's not very dark. And she said, you know, my body represents rape. I mean, again, I can hardly make the statement, but she wrote a long article. And if we take that into awareness, if we put something like that on Strata, if we take it into awareness strata, you know, and of course the language that slaves had and the language that's recorded is an uneducated language. So we could almost come from the place that, well, they're not very bright. They can't read, they can't write, they can't speak correctly. And yet it must be the case that they were magnificent political leaders, some of them. They were magnificent parents, some of them. For sure. Otherwise, it couldn't be happening. They couldn't have turned out the geniuses they've turned out. And keep turning them out, you know, how to keep up with them. So bringing, you know I go on, that is some of my particular interests, but I think within that, say that situation I presented, and, you know, try and be brief and tight about it rather than go on too long. But, you know, the strata material can apply to that. You know, perseverance strata just sort of, you know, comes out like, you know, dawn coming up in the east. And you know, emotional strata would be just intriguing from our point of view. You know, we take a psychodynamic point of view. If we take modern theories of trauma, you know, how do we put into that context that you know, your child at 5 is robust and healthy, and a boy or a girl who's really pretty, hard to say. Therefore, that person will be sold. That person will be sold. That person will grow up never knowing mother and father. And mother and father have to know that they'll never see that child again. I mean, in terms of emotional strata, you can't make it, okay? I mean, it's too much. It'll break anybody. And yet it doesn't. So and if we bring in, you know, social strata all over the place there, you know, and even they're living 2%, and then you go into communication strata, and it must have been the case that everyone had 2 communication stratas, okay? They had one that they put on when they were relating to white people, and they had another one that they put on with each other, within which they could develop their intelligence, their education, their religion, their perseverance. So anyway, I guess I want to be able to take the strata material and the Pelham material and place it in these type of situations. I mean, I'm taking a very dire one there. And of course, the other one that's been written about for a long time, that's been written about since 1945 in the therapeutic world is the Holocaust. And how did people survive the Holocaust? And that's Frankel's work, Primo Levi's work, although he's a scientist, not a therapist. Freud barely escaped. So then, social strata, communication strata, evaluation strata, awareness strata there. So anyway, that's the applications of strata and the relationship between them. And there's something about, next year, Jerusalem. They weren't going to get to Jerusalem next year. Generations, hundreds of years away from getting to Jerusalem. And the slaves...
Can you just explain that a bit, Peter, because I'm not familiar with that phrase.
Oh, yeah. Jews always said, if I understand, and correct me, anyone in here correct me, but Jews would say, either at Passover, Hanukkah, next year, Jerusalem, okay? Now, the diaspora would say next year, Jerusalem. Starting, I don't know, when did the diaspora start? 600? And, they weren't going to get to Jerusalem next year. They got to Jerusalem. And I guess the similar thing in the Afro-American and through slavery, they put something similar into their gospel music. And in that human evil, I think we can say both things. The Holocaust and slavery were human evil. And I think without saying, I think we've got a contribution to make about issues like that, how they work. How they work.
I think
and of course, go on.
Well, I was only going to say, it's one of the things that I find so impressive about Pelin, that it can address through Strata and other tools, like any aspect of human endeavor. And most therapies are much narrower than that. Or if they look at things like Holocaust or evil, this might not be a fully accurate statement, but would have a tendency to look at it through emotional strata, I would imagine, and subconscious motivation, and not be able to, from a therapeutic point of view, not be able to put it in a political and historical context, because their container's not big enough for most therapies.
Yeah, and I've said, because I mentioned here once before, I think here, but certainly elsewhere, what's called a SWOT analysis. It's something that comes out of business: strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats, SWOT. And you sort of do a diagram on it. And we've done it a couple of times in the management side of Pelin. It'd be interesting to do it again now. But, one of our strengths is, I think we can say this, that, there are really wide applications of the Pelin tools. And then when you get to weaknesses, one of the weaknesses in Pelin is there are wide applications of the tools, because it isn't as clear as an approach that has one or two crystal clear ideas and fits into a academic department and a professional group. So I think our breadth is both our strength and our weakness. And I think it needs to be seen that way, realistically. So that, I sort of took off on that because of stuff I was writing about today. But there's a way of looking at strata that is directly, and I think this is something I should do more of and a little bit take for granted, how it affects clients, how you can use it with clients, okay? And just giving some examples quickly.
Peter, Elizabeth just wrote in the chat.
Yeah.
In the chat that she did a ton of SWOT analysis when she was in school doing her business.
Oh, great. That's great. So, Elizabeth, you know more about it than I do. What do you think of it?
I'm sorry, can you come back in just a minute because my daughter just hurt herself?
Oh, sure, whenever. Kids come first.
Okay, be back in a minute.
That's a Pellin rule. It takes me back a long way. Okay, I'll resist that digression. So, I'm thinking of a client who was doing a lot of work, a man who's an architect, and was very indecisive. And that's almost the issue he brought to therapy. Ambivalence. Ambivalence was a very popular word when we go back to the 60s that lasted longer in Canada. Yeah, and he was very negative. Worked on stuff. Had a marriage that was holding together. Didn't think he'd find anyone, and then did find somebody at work, and it surprisingly worked out. Agonized about that. Couldn't make up a decision. But functioned at work, functioned at in relationship. Didn't mess up that relationship with his ambivalence. I don't know if I can get all the sort of details across here. And by the way, when I'm using examples like this, I change a lot of stuff around, so no one could be recognized. And I said earlier, I'm not a very religious person, but the thing I really felt this person needed was awareness strata, okay? There's just something about all the work that sort of pointed in that direction. And anyway, he went to the Buddhist Center in South London and got very involved with the Buddhist Center, and it worked for him. It didn't mean it didn't cancel me out, but it was something that person needed, almost, does life have any meaning question, and doesn't, life not have any meaning, plus the emotional strata, stuck point about ambivalence, and it worked. It just worked, and it worked to teach the strata material and to teach where this fitted in. And of course, as soon as we did that, accomplishment strata and perseverance strata were really strong. So, it wasn't saying, oh my God, you've got this big lack. It that you have these strengths and there is this piece missing. And perhaps it's worthwhile trying this. Elizabeth.
Hi, Peter. Okay, I'm back. And I just wanted to let you know that.
Yeah.
So SWOT analysis is an interesting tool. And you are right that something can fit in more than one category. What's also interesting is when you take it a step further into the toes analysis, same
What's
letter.
that called?
Toes, same letters backwards.
Oh, okay.
And you apply the different sections to each other, strengths to weaknesses and threats, and otherwise around the circle. Because when you do that systematically, you come up with things that you might not have if you were just assuming a solution to your problem.
Yeah. That's interesting because we just used it a little bit in passing, but found it a bit sort of amazing. I guess I'd been introduced to it at a workshop some way time back, because there was a certain time when the business stuff and time management overlapped with the alternative therapies, and I felt really enriched them. The other tool I've used, and we'll get at this another time, was the time management thing of having 3 points of view. What do I want to achieve in the next 2 years? What would I want to achieve if I only have 6 months to live? And what do I want to be able to achieve at the end of my life? I want to be able to look back at the end of my life and say I've achieved. And then going through a particular process of putting priorities and numbers on all of those, and then coming up with life goals. That's what it's called, life goals exercise. Time management, came out time management. And for some years, I used that quite a lot. And I guess where both of them fit in, I think they're very SWOT analysis. I had heard of TOES, although I'd never, used it. But as soon as you told me, oh yeah, you reverse the letters, I remember that. But SWOT analysis and what we call the life goals exercise, they really provide real depth for evaluation strata. That's what they are. They're a big deal about evaluation strata. I've used Elizabeth, I've used the life goals much more than I've used SWOT. So thanks for that, and we'll get back to it for sure. You got
And I
something
just,
yeah, Mary.
I just wanted to say something about awareness strata, just as Elizabeth came back. What you described in that case study was what happened to me when I was never seen it as awareness strata before quite. Well, I guess I had if I stopped to think about it. Anyway, what happened was a big part of getting well from being manic, in the mania, you're just so convincingly the center of the whole universe. It's embarrassing to say it, but it's true. And a huge part of my getting well was developing awareness strata and being able to pit against that arrogant conception that comes inside the high, the spiritual knowledge that I was teeny tiny and that was God was huge. And I doubt what my capacity to get well without that, because I just, humility. I just needed that humility to struggle towards wellness. And that's certainly a tried and trusted method. It doesn't mean, I mean, you have a lot of humility. It doesn't mean people without a specific belief can't have humility. But for me, it was very helpful for developing that.
It's interesting you said that, Mary, because in this writing bit I was doing today, I said, we've only got the tiny part of the truth, but we believe and are passionate about the bit we have. But at the same time, and it was interesting because I guess I just want to share that. I said, I hope we are modest about what we have. And this just sort of interested me. You can't really say humility, because humility is something that needs to be observed, not claimed, okay? You can't quite go around saying, I have humility. It doesn't work. Someone can say, you have humility, but we can't say we have modesty. And I think that's something we do claim in Pelham. And it's both, yes, Cynthia.
Oh, no.
Oh,
Was
sorry.
Cynthia
Elizabeth.
wanting to say something?
No, not at the moment.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't want to interrupt your sentence.
No, I'm just not, I'm not concentrating enough on the technology, okay, today. So,
okay.
Yeah, so I'll be more careful about when people want to come in.
Okay, so I'm thinking about awareness strata, and I feel that there is a sense of one's own smallness in relation to something bigger kind of inherent in it, perhaps, regardless of sort of the target of one's awareness strata. I had a very interesting conversation with a longtime friend of mine who's been pretty much an atheist for the whole time I've known him, except recently he has this sort of very unique concept of what a higher power he could do business with would be like. And it would be sort of the emergent system of the world and how its pieces interact. And so what I said, and he agreed with, was, so what you're saying is God is the thing that gobsmacks you at Yosemite, which is, his favorite national park and a place he derives a lot of true rest from.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah. And I think that might be true of somebody whose awareness strata is in relation to science, to nature, or to history, is that you can't claim humility, but you can claim a sense of your own smallness.
Yes, yes.
And that may be essential to awareness strata.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I think it
that's the
is,
idea
and
I'm
I
throwing
think,
at it.
yeah, no, I think it is. And one of the things we say about the calm, and there's a real relationship between the calm and awareness strata, is that in the calm, we can take on both the things. You know, I'm just a grain of sand in the passing of time, right? I'm that small. And at the same time, hey guys, I'm important. I've got something to contribute. And one of the characteristics of the calm, we can hold both those things. In extreme, this is just bringing in the pendulum. If we go up on that one on an extreme high, then I'll have to be the, hey guys, I've got something big to offer. And then if we go to, which could be destructive, certainly destructive on my field. I mean, professional conferences in my field, you know, if journalists went along or script writers for movies, you know, they've got a lot of ammunition to create really funny movies, okay? Because here are these caring professionals ripping the shreds out of each other about whether or not Fritz Perls was a theoretician, okay? I mean, that's when I was at, okay? So, and it's a pendulum swing, you know. I know what Fritz Perls was all about. You know, the guy had a, 50-year career on 3 continents, so no one's going to know it all. It's silly. We're just silly. But terribly serious and vicious confrontations. Real lack of social strata, communication strata, and just probably burying their own awareness strata. They're nice people. Couldn't resist it. Okay. And then I think the smallness, if we take it into the lower of the pendulum, can be suicidal. Okay. So it's the sort of, I think what we've got in the strata and the tools, it, is a sort of combination. Because certainly the low, which we teach a lot about in the training courses, in the deep low, what is called the deep pleasant low, okay? Now this is all about valuations, all about emotional strata. In the deep pleasant low, which is sort of martyrdom, self-pity, people can really fake that they're in a calm. You know, what we train people to just recognize the constant negativity with no break. That's the danger thing. You know, I know no one loved me. I'll never find the right person.
I'm confused. You called that a pleasant high? I mean, a pleasant low? That doesn't sound
Yes.
pleasant.
No, it's strange. Do you know the movie MASH?
I know it. I haven't seen much
Anyway,
of
the song.
Yeah.
The song that's about suicide in MASH. Totally.
I don't know that song.
Yeah. Singing this. Anyway, yes, and it's technical, so it's the absolutely right question, Cynthia.
It goes, can I sing the song? Suicide is painless. You go through many changes. Something. Do you remember that? It's the theme.
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
Yeah, it's the theme to the series, which went on for hundreds of years, still on telly all over the world, I think.
And because I know where I was, and I'm not even American, but Americans of a particular generation can tell you where they were at the last episode of MASH, okay? It was
I was
a
a little
national...
young.
Pardon?
I was a little young. That was like what my parents
Yeah,
thought.
exactly. Your parents would know where they were.
That same friend I was talking about once played that song on the clarinet at a band concert in high school.
Okay, yes. Different generations. That's the different generations of social strata. It's a nice use of social strata. Yeah, because for some of it, that Bob Dylan sold all his songs for $300 million is a very, very big news item. And I was in the Apple shop that I went to once, and one of the young, and they're all very bright, the people who give you help there. And this young guy said, "Who's Bob Dylan?"
Wow.
It's sort of, I realized my generation.
Do you mind can I interrupt with another suicide song?
Yeah, you can, but I want to get back to the pleasant low in a minute. Sure,
no, but I think it is. I think it is an example of a pleasant low. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, go.
You know, I just got into Andy Williams recently, very recently, strangely, and so on this new CD I've got, he sings that song that was a hit in the 70s by Gilbert O'Sullivan, and he sang it back then in this slow way, and it's like, oh, deathly. But Andy Williams, with his beautiful voice, sings it sort of pepped up. And I was thinking, why do I like this? It's so different to the dirge it used to be. And it's something like the contrast. It's sort of cheerful. It's got a bit of a pace, and it's cheerful. But the words, it goes, well, in a little while from now, if I'm not feeling any less sour, I've promised myself I'll treat myself and visit a nearby tower where, climbing to the top, I'll throw myself off.
Okay.
And it's about a guy who's just been jilted. So, and then it goes on about the story of being jilted at the altar, and all the friends went away saying, "Oh well, I guess we might as well go home." And here I am alone again. Naturally, that's the name of the song. I just remembered now. But
okay, thank you.
It just came to me as you're saying it. It's like, it was only today that I was hearing it, thinking something about the peppy beat and like the seriousness. I think that, what is it you're talking about? The pleasant, no, not the pleasant low. What are you talking about?
Yeah,
what
the pleasant low. The
pleasant low.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you're describing the. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, because when you're describing it, I'm like, that's how, I mean, when I get into that state, this is like when, like, I do it for a while and I'm like, God, I can't even stand being around myself. It's why it's hard to.
Yeah, because if I can just do a straight bit of teaching,
Yes,
this is, the compulsive pleasant low can be a place of great creativity, okay? Because it can be sort of dark nights of the soul, is the place where great poetry can come from, great art can come from. But it can also be very, very, very dangerous. Because in that place, and the songs are relevant, and the country music and the blues got all sorts of, compulsive, pleasant lows. In fact, without compulsive, pleasant lows, there ain't no blues. Okay, that's a strong, opinionated statement. But the point we particularly look at in terms of safety is in that place, in the compulsive low, pleasant or unpleasant, the attraction to hurt is terribly strong, and someone in that place can convince others that they're in the calm. That's the tricky bit of it. And they're not, they're in a compulsive low. And in a compulsive low, someone can take their life, and it's not because life was impossible, but it was because they were in the compulsive low. In a sense, the suicide is accidental, okay? Suicide from the calm of the pendulum, that's a different thing, okay?
Peter, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Is it true to say that, you know, I don't think I've ever had that kind of a deep low, because my deep lows are full of self-torture with the negative thoughts. Is there a way the thoughts are not as tortuous, or is it that they don't have the anxiety hidden highs, or?
Again, you know, the pendulum's a tool that's applied to all these different things. So, you know, Michelangelo's got his hammer and chisel, and he's creating the David, or he's creating the Bruges Madonna, which is the gentlest, you know, expression of maternal love anywhere.
I'm
almost.
Still confused in terms of how the pleasant. Am I missing something, or am I waiting for?
Yeah, no, that's why we haven't. I haven't finished the teaching bit.
Okay, sorry.
Is there compulsive and pleasant? Is that interchangeable, or is that? Because I'm also curious to understand why we say compulsive and what that.
Yeah. Okay. Compulsive is a technical term for the extreme swings of the pendulum. Okay. So the word compulsive is about how high and low the pendulum swings. The word compulsive is about how much the pendulum is swinging to and from extremes. So in a sense, compulsive in that sense is a jargon word. Could almost be simply replaced by extreme, okay? Now, whether something's pleasant or unpleasant is about how it hurts in terms of pain. Now, we just take the high side for a minute, because on the high side, it's very easy to distinguish a pleasant high from an unpleasant high. We know the difference between being in love and being angry. You know, we know the difference between wanting to feel great and spoil our family by spending a lot of money because we simply feel great, and feeling that Christmas or Hanukkah is going to be a nightmare because I don't want to see my family. I mean, they're on the high side, the difference between pleasant and unpleasant is really clear. But just to stay at that for a moment, it's not pleasant is good and unpleasant is bad. You know, heroin is a pleasant high. Being drunk is a pleasant high. Being sexually abusive is a huge pleasant high. You know, again, I hesitate to use the example, but rape is a pleasant high. You know, hugely a compulsive pleasant high. Can't stop.
For the abuser. You need to add that for the abuser.
Yeah, thank you, Nikki. Yeah. And I need to put that in the first part of the sentence.
Yeah.
For the abuser, for the perpetrator of sexual abuse, whether that person is a husband, a father, or a priest, that is a compulsive pleasant high. Being furiously angry and well, almost take that same position, someone who is the victim and stands up and uses anger to even use anger to compulsively, without control, make sure a whole lot of people knew that this act occurred, okay? I mean, that's an unpleasant high of anger, but it's productive, not destructive. So the words are jargon words, okay? Then if I can just go, any questions in a minute, but go on to Cynthia's point. On the low side, it's much, much more subtle, okay? There's not that clear distinction between a pleasant low and an unpleasant low. An unpleasant low are, in the main, the sort of things that Mary was talking about. Depression, guilt, and I was going to say let me just put self-doubt there for a moment. And self-doubt, fear because fear can be on a low side as well as a high side, okay? Someone who is just sort of quietly petrified for days and days and days because they're going to be discovered, as a runaway slave, stuff I've been reading about. So that, in a quick way, depression is an unpleasant low because it's painful. But the pleasant low of martyrdom, okay, the pleasant low of self-pity can be enjoyable in a way, okay? But those differences are much more complex than the differences on the high side. Does that make it clearer, Cynthia?
I think so. It's not, I think I can understand this on an intellectual level, but I have never felt, I don't think I've ever felt that self-pity or martyrdom have been enjoyable, but that could just be my personality. So.
I think it could be your personality, and I think it could be a very healthy part of your personality, because I'm talking about stuff that other people will use psychiatric terms to talk about pathology, okay? Because there's a certain place where the pleasant low can be that which is experienced by a psychopath, okay? A real psychopath. People use the word too loosely, but there are psychopaths. I know that. Bad guys, really bad guys. So they can have a pleasant high of murder and then an unpleasant, and then a pleasant low of a weird sort of superiority, okay? Even when they're serving time in prison. And they sort of give out, a sort of persona that's terrifying, and everyone leaves them alone. So they serve their time fairly easily. Odd sort of thing, odd use of the pendulum. So the fact that someone doesn't have compulsive pleasant lows might be one definition of mental health, okay?
Or also, I was just thinking it could be cultural, because I start going, and I think that's my Swedish side that comes out.
Oh yeah, it could well be. No, because I was thinking, it could well be your Swedish side. Because if you want to understand pleasant lows, any Italian airport departure lounge, okay? Anyone. The family seeing the kids off, or the kids seeing grandma off, and it's tragic. I mean, it's just tragic. And then they walk away and everything's fine. So I think you're right. I think that's that Mary was saying how the tools can be used. I think there's something nice about that, yeah, because that's social strata. Italians aren't Swedes. Swedes aren't Italians.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just
'Cause-
remembering a story of because I was trying to figure out my grandmother's astrological chart because I don't have a time, and I was asking her questions. I asked her one question. I says, well, were you kind of depressed? Did you feel depressed? And she says, we didn't get depressed in those days. We just pulled
Right.
ourselves up and did what we
Yeah.
need to do. And then I
Yeah.
told my mother that, and she laughed. She cried every day. What is she talking about?
Yeah, yeah. And the English have the expression stiff upper lip. You can't translate stiff upper lip into Italian, doesn't work.
Well, I was thinking about that in the Swedish culture. I'm like, Swedish culture wouldn't even admit there was something to have a stiff upper lip about.
Right. Okay. Yes. Yes. And that's social strata. Because it's interesting, Italians in the main, particularly the part of Italy, I know, they don't like Germans, okay?
Yeah.
But Germans never pick up. The Italians don't like them, okay? The Germans are sort of so organized and their thought is so if someone, is nice to you, well, then they like you. And, Italians have the memory links that go back thousands of years, and that part of their life.
Peter, Elizabeth put something in the chat that seems.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if you want to say, Elizabeth, do you?
Oh, I don't mind. It's not a big thing. It's just, when I was suicidal, it was never in a low. It was always an unpleasant high.
Yeah.
I mean, I could think about it in a low, but the point at which I was willing to do, my heart was going 100 miles a minute.
Yeah.
And I almost existed outside of myself in that state.
Yeah, and that's emotional strata, and that's where the tools are tools, not formulas.
And
yeah,
it's even though I haven't been suicidal at all, including ideation, in over a year, yay, that's really cool. My unpleasant highs are the most dangerous part of the swing for me.
Yeah.
In terms of messing my life up.
Yeah, well, my and I guess if my teaching is so often about the high side rather than the low side, because my pendulum goes high more than it goes low. Okay, so that sort of skews it a bit. But I even say, I don't think I've ever made a mistake in my life that didn't have as a central part of it just simply going too fast. And I've made a lot of mistakes, but just simply going too fast. My mistakes are almost always on the high side.
Yeah. I mean, in a low, I just
unpleasant,
curl up in bed and I don't do much. So
yeah.
Sorry.
No, go, Mary.
Well, it was just going back to something, because I'm not trying to look for a formula. I say in my defense before I say this, but I thought I noted a pattern and I just wanted to run it past you. It seemed like what you were saying about martyrdom and self-pity is a place where it's everyone else's fault. And in the kind of low I get, it's very much me who's the, complete failure and I'm never going to get better. And it's very turned inwards, and that's where the torture comes in for me when I used to have those kind of lows. So I just wondered if that was a relevant, I don't know what to call it, pattern, tendency, somehow relevant.
Well, I think it will be for some. Say the first bit you said.
Well, just saying, it just occurred to me that in feelings of martyrdom or self-pity, you're very much saying it's their fault.
Well, yeah, but that was the bit I wanted to pick. That could be either a pleasant or unpleasant low. If pleasant or unpleasant, how we feel about it, okay? Now, the person who, and there's a lot of good stuff in the pleasant low, compulsive pleasant low. I mean, there's very good stuff in all the extremes. But what we're saying, they're like, they're like fire, okay? We can use it to do something constructive, or particularly the part of the world you live in, or you can, be careless with fire and, it creates a terrible forest fire that is very destructive. The fire bit's the same, and the bit that's cooking the meal, take it out of there and put it into a remote, dry part of California. It'll be terribly destructive. So that's sort of what the tools mean, okay? And I think the tip-off to both pleasant and unpleasant, lows or highs, is literally how we feel about them. Because if we're tortured by it, they're not. That's an unpleasant low because we feel lousy. But if the justification comes in, and that could create I've done work elsewhere on this, on radicalization, and how do you pick kids? By kids I mean young adults, or teenagers, who might become radicalized, okay, and become terrorists. The pendulum is sort of interesting there, okay, because there's a lot of almost fullness of belief that's almost extreme highs, extreme lows feeding on each other, okay. And on a more personal level, say with clients, the client I talked about, that was sort of characterized by lows that were bearable, quite familiar. There's something about the pleasant low, and that's where sort of I use the term martyrdom, but metaphorically. It's a sort of familiar, lousy place, okay. But because I can get there. That's the sort of low I have. I mean, you want me to tell you 20 ways my work is crap. And when I'm in a low, I could just rattle them off.
The psychiatrist that John found, the only psychiatrist John found to be helpful out of the many he tried, said to him, depression is like a familiar, comfortable dressing gown that you put on.
That is a totally accurate description of the pleasant low. And I reckon that psychiatrist also knew how dangerous it is, because it can fake that someone's close to the calm. And our sort of point of view is really clear. If someone's in a compulsive low, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant, you're not going to be able to get through to them, but you never take your eye off them. It's about attention.
As
Elizabeth.
as someone who experiences, I think, pleasant lows from time to time, I would say that sulking alone is as dangerous as drinking alone.
Say again, I missed the first word.
Sulking, S-U-L-K,
Oh, yes, yes.
is as dangerous as drinking alone.
Yeah, that
Which
can
is,
be true.
which is why
yeah.
I've had to learn to whine to people instead of keeping it to myself.
Yeah, I know. When I and some, because I absolutely understand that one. I mean, I've had at times when I'm whining to the people to the point where they're just sick and tired of me. Okay, that's about going through
And
divorces.
it's still safer than keeping it in.
Yeah, it's still safer than keeping it in. Yeah.
The other thing I was thinking about the deep lows, I think it applies to both, but maybe more relevant to deep pleasant low, is that thing about where it connects with evaluation strata, that in a deep pleasant low, well, I mean, in any deep low, you think your evaluation is accurate.
Mm.
You know, you think everything really is that messed up and going to stay that way forever. And in a pleasant low, as you say, you think you're actually in the calm. You don't think you're in a calm in the kind of low I have, but it's very hard to see anything other than the foreverness of it.
Yeah, and what the teaching is, as I've said other times, it's sort of broad brush, very much broad brush, because the intricacies and the subtleties are sort of all over the place. Because there's some, I know this, and I say that with that funny sort of sureness, because maybe I don't know that. It's not something I knew personally at all. But I knew to recognize when, I might have used this example before, and this affected, my use of the pendulum, the whole development of Pelham, as against sort of what Gestalt therapy was. I had to be concerned about safety because, I was working with guys who created a great deal of damage and destruction in the world. But I learned to recognize someone who would say, in a low, okay, Peter, I'm getting out of here. I don't feel that bad about what I've done. A whole lot of people do bad things in the world, but I'm tired of it. And I sort of learned, it was just, over time, it wasn't theory, it was practice. A particular way of saying, I'm tired of it, coming from a low that someone was sitting out, gave a real indication that this person was going to do really well when they got out. Someone else coming in and saying, I'm getting out, I'm going to go straight, I'm not going to see them anymore, I've got a girlfriend, and wow, I'm going to do it this time. Often they were back, a few months later, they're back inside. The guy who said, I'm tired of it, and not in a funny way, not even quite taking enough responsibility, but just saying I'm tired of it, I just knew over time. And it was almost taking that sort of observation and then putting it on David Pelham's pendulum. And that was someone who, sort of served their time by being low most of the time. Lows can be much, much, much longer than highs. And you could probably say, talking about formulas, and there aren't any, you would probably say someone, who serves a, 2 to 6 year prison term in the low all the time is going to do better than when they get out than someone who is high a lot of the time. And of course, that's where, that's got a lot of things about, you know, theories and research on rehabilitation and all that stuff gets really tied up in this.
I just
Because what you got to do to get parole is take responsibility for what you did.
I have something that I thought of. I don't know
There's
if it's a
someone-
question or a.
Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. When you're talking about the lows, and I was thinking about how, for me, things are tied in with both communication and social strata. And I think when Elizabeth was talking about not telling anybody, for me, if I'm, especially if I'm in a low, and I don't know if I'm a pleasant low, but I get this, it's not even like a thought, it's this feeling in my chest. I don't know how to explain it, but for me, in terms of being able to talk about or communicating, for me, if like I said, that I'm all right, just get it out. For me, it almost feels like I'm being over dramatic if I tell people how I'm actually feeling, you know, like if I'm, and I don't know how that plays out into that kind, and, you know, as a result of that, I often don't get the help when I need it because I don't sound like I need help. And I don't know, I'm not sure exactly how that plays into anything, but that made me think
Well,
of it.
no, it's a really, really good question. The time's gone quicker than I thought. We have to end in a little bit. No, that's a really good question. It really fits because you mentioned the part where it's social strata, but it's also communication strata and emotional strata. And a little bit is that bit of perseverance strata where I can put up with this without telling anybody. So it's a place, and that's where, you know, I've said other times, the way the tools work is if we can sort of play with them, you know. Oh, might be a bit of that, might be a bit of that, might be a bit of that. But I think in that, and then it all sort of comes down to evaluation strata, I will set myself the goal of reaching out for help. Yeah, so it really fits, you know. Tamara, do you want to come in? Paul?
Oh yeah. I've been thinking about the compulsive low in the word compelling, so that, you know, feeling, I was thinking of the sirens that call you out until you drown, and that's a pleasant low all the way to your death without you raising the alarm. What's alarming about the pleasant lows, since thinking about suicidality, is that there is no.
I missed a word.
Suicidality.
Yeah.
Is what's alarming for anyone else is that this person doesn't appear to be alarmed.
Yes, that's it.
And
that's it.
In my own experience, which has been too recent for comfort, really, but it's scared the fucking shit out of me to look back and know that I was sleepwalking and just not feeling nothing was scaring the fucking shit out of me, and it was never scarier.
Yeah.
And now I'm looking at, for the first time, because I'm very pro anything that works, medication, whatever. That one side effect of an antidepressant is suicide. I've always thought, well, not only is that ironic, but what's that about? And I always figured, oh my God, that's when there's a really bad interaction or something. Who the hell knows? But I've had an experience with a new medication that I think was really working on me in ways that I was not fully aware. That
in a good way or a bad way?
Very drawn to a pleasant low. And with a loss of perspective, so that there is the depression with psychosis, But this is like an absolute, there's an absoluteness about mistaking your subjective reality for objective reality, which is psychotic thinking and is dangerous. And there is not, it's not feeling bored ultimately, and feeling frustrated and wanting to, well, the difference between, I don't know when we began to say this, but the difference between a neurotic and a psychotic is that the neurotic eventually gets bored and rolls out of bed. But that there is something quite captivating about walking out into the river with stones in your pockets and Virginia Woolfing it, and I get it now. I don't think that, I don't think that anyone's not, they're not looking for your, it feels indulgent. And indeed, I think that there is something very scary that is being indulged and indulging itself, using you as its, pulling your strings and your brain and whatever else. But it's in that pleasant low.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. One of my sort of theory, and I agree with you, I'm absolutely interested in anything that works. And I guess that's why, going back to slavery, going back to the Holocaust, and of course that's what Frankl wrote about, what got him through. So, what got people through these terrible times? Because historically they got through. And I think one of the things,
they get through fighting like hell, and as soon as the fight's over, they commit suicide. So more vets.
That's the other side of it.
Get killed.
Yeah, that's the other side of it. And the bit I sort of want to say here, and I get it's the calm of the pendulum. Okay, the calm.
Yeah.
And one of my one of the ways that pharmaceutical medication doesn't attract me is that I feel it takes people away from their really own authentic calm.
Yes.
And I think within their really own authentic calm is the healing process. Then I come in as a practitioner and using Strata and say, okay, how can I teach this person? How can I help this person find their calm? And that might be really hard work. So it's not
can't even access my calm without the right calm. I can't even access my own calm without the right medications.
Right.
And that's true too. That's true too. So, and again, it's sort of evaluation Strata, what works, okay? But so then it's a question, how can I help this person have their real authentic calm with the medication?
Right.
Or how can I help this person have their real authentic calm if they have the suicidal thoughts that are around every day? So, and then I just want to put this bit out. Then the pressure or the responsibility in Pelham comes back on the practitioner. How can I be a good teacher of this? Not on how the client is resisting this, but how can I be a good teacher of this? And I just say, how can someone be a good teacher of mathematics? That's an active job to do. And the teaching side of Pelham, which is sort of using the tools within the therapeutic process, how can I be a teacher rather than how can I diagnose that client? It's a different, and I think that brings in, that's where the Strata material is really useful. Because those of us who are in this field, have to have some handle on our awareness strata and our social strata. Not to put everything into emotional strata. How can I believe in something so my clients can believe in something? And that's not saying it, but sort of projecting it. We have to stop there. I'll go first in stopping. Yeah, I've just enjoyed this. So I guess I want to say it. Don't quite know where the time went. And I'm in King's Lynn, on the east coast of England. Yeah, that's me. Nikki?
I'm Nikki. I'm in Wimbledon. It's good to be reminded of the life goals exercise. I haven't thought about that for decades. That would be very interesting to go back to that and do that again now compared to, I know, 30 years ago or something.
Okay.
So,
Cynthia?
Cynthia, I'm Kankakee, and this was good. There's a lot to think about, and I really like this Strata material. It's so, I keep saying that, but I really like it a lot. So,
Thank you. No, that's important to me. Thank you. Tamara?
I'm Tamara in San Francisco. And I am taking my rest. I'm learning like a Roman, and I wanted to say that this is not disrespect. I really do need, if I can help my head, this is one way I can do that. And I'm having some issues, some physical issues, and I'm also coming off of an antidepressant, and my eyes, when I move them, it makes everything go off in my brain. So I'm trying to keep still right now.
Okay. Elizabeth?
Hi, I'm Elizabeth from Eugene, Oregon, and there's something about the meds that I feel like I kind of gotta say here, which is I've been genetically tested as unable to process the common forms of one of the nutrients that is responsible for making a lot of the brain chemicals that we use to regulate ourselves. And so my best access to my authentic self is to have the assistance of both supplements and medication.
Thank you. That's an important statement. Mary, we ending up?
Yeah, I'm Mary in Rosarito Beach, and I was about to ask a question, so I'm going to throw it in, not necessarily to be answered. I was just thinking, I can't remember the phrase you were talking about, holding something for the client, but I was thinking about the phrase that you can use about holding hope for the client, and until they can feel it themselves. I wondered if that is in awareness strata. I mean, I was just wondering, no idea if it's connected at all. Just that, obviously it's strength and health, seeing strength and health where the client doesn't. That would be true, wouldn't
Yeah,
it?
let me, yes, sort of, the answer. And I guess, yes, sort of. I think that's an indication that that's where we'll start on Wednesday, right?
Yeah, so actually, it doesn't matter if it's wrong, but because we haven't spoken, I put Wednesday as me and Nikki, because I think we did that last time after you'd had a whole virtual pen in Italy, and it can just be different from that. But
That's fine. So next week I'll do hope, because
okay.
I've developed, and there's a background on the Pell and Hope material. Yep. So I'll see you next Sunday, and Nikki and Mary will be there on Wednesday.
Is that okay with you, Nikki, as I
Yep,
didn't have
yep.
time to consult?
That's
Okay,
fine, yeah.
thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, all right,
Bye-bye.
thanks
Thank
everyone.
you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Bye,
Thank-
everybody.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
for
Bye.
coming.
Bye.
Bye.